on behalf of Navyana Buddhist Charitable Trust. And just before going to talk, I'll just give may not take much time, a few minutes only. So there are many center under there is a school of School of Ambedkar Studies. Within that, there is the Center of Ambedkar Center for Buddhist Past and Social Memories. And this is like a center where we are planning to try to understand various symbols, the archaeological existence of Buddhism, and there are many things are there that we are trying to we will explore. And so this series of lecture, as many of you know, that they are the 6 lectures that we have a plan. And I would like to thank you, Mangesh Dahiwale sir. I'll call the venerable Mangesh, because he has been, we know that all, I mean, that he has been engaged in Buddhist, I think, last many years, like I know from last almost that, and I think many more years before he has been engaged, not only in India, but many other, like the countries, in specifically in the South, and also other like Europe and other countries. So this is like I would like to thank Venerable Mangesh Dahiwale for this contribution, and also to agree to give these talks under this center. So today's talk that we have a plan on Buddhist semiotics, the understanding through the stupas. So we know that in Buddhist, I can say the culture and Buddhist tradition and Buddhist like historical evidences, the stupas are very, very significant. That started from the period of Ashoka. I mean, so through that, I think I am like a kind of not much aware about this topic when I was reading and when I was discussing with Professor Bodhi, and we are deciding to talk. So I think this will be even new for me to hear from Venerable Mangesh Dahiwale about this topic, and also this the Buddhist semiotic through the stupas. So I will not take much time. I think, and as I mentioned, that Venerable Mangesh Dahiwale has been engaged since long time, and he has a lot of knowledge, and he has been lot of talks and lot of writings he has been doing. And he also engaged in many organizations, specifically the Manuski and the Buddhist Trust, what I know, and he also engaged in many other things. So with that, I know that many of you know, do not need any introduction of Venerable Mangesh Dahiwale. So with that small note, I would like to invite him for the talk. So we were just thinking that maybe we can have a small, like a few minutes for some, if there's any specific question, answer, I mean, any comes. Yes. Otherwise, we will have like a, yeah. So yeah, anyway, so I'll welcome to Venerable Mangesh Dahiwale, and over to you. Over to you.
So, first of all, I'm very delighted to be talking about these 6 topics, which are very important for understanding the Buddhist history, and also by that way, the Buddhist future. And it has been always a delight to be able to talk on these very important topics of, what we call archaeology, but it's about history, it's about culture. And as we will see today, it's much more than just the historical analysis of the events. So today, let me begin by greeting you on the very auspicious occasion of Ashad Purnima. Today is a full moon day, very important day on which the Buddha turned the wheel of the Dhamma traditionally. And it's called a traditional Dhamma Chakra Pravartan day. And I think it's very auspicious for all of us to begin such kind of a series of talks on the Buddhist archaeology and the Buddhist history. So I have made a small presentation, which I will share with you all. Okay. So, this, whenever we talk about the history of Buddhism, and particularly with reference to India, the archaeological research has been going on for a long time. And after 1956 conversion, a very remarkable scholar, I would say a remarkable man, Rahul Sankrityayan, who was himself an archaeologist, and though he was not trained as an archaeologist, but he did a lot of things on archaeological issues. he said that before the people in India looked at these sort of heritage sites or archaeological sites as some kind of the Buddhist sites. And it was like a kind of a subject which was like, which was not dear to them. But when Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar converted in 1956, there were millions of people who could go to these archaeological sites and they could claim that they are their sites. So, for example, if I go to an archaeological site as a Buddhist, I don't look at the archaeological sites as just the Buddhist site, but I own them, saying that that's my heritage. So, now there are many people in India who visit the archaeological sites, and they can claim that, it's their inheritance, it's their history, it's their past that they are witnessing. And I think this is very remarkable when we look at the archaeology of Buddhism, particularly with reference to India, that there are now millions of people who go to these hundreds of sites throughout India, and they claim that, these sites belong to them. So over the course of my 6 lectures, I'm going to cover a lot of ground in terms of the history of archaeology, the great Emperor Ashoka, and then how the Buddhism spread from the Middle Kingdom of India into all over the places throughout the world. And then I'm going to again talk about the history of revolution and counter-revolution in terms of the epigraphy and the symbols. And in the end, I'm going to talk about, in the last lecture, I'm going to try to cover various archaeological sites. So today, by the way of, I won't say introduction, because this is a very important topic for us to understand the Buddhist symbols, to understand the Buddhist science as a way to unlock a lot of the mysteries that are locked. And they exist in our plain sites, but because we do not have that language or that symbolical understanding, we do not understand the significance of them. So to begin with, I would say that the stupa as a Buddhist symbol is so important and so significant that in archaeological history of India, or even I would say the history of the world, if we do not understand the significance of this stupa, we cannot appreciate not only the Buddhist history or archaeology, but Buddhism itself. So let me begin by introducing you to the concept of stupa. So what is the stupa? And from where the stupa comes from? So at the end of his life, the Buddha recommended to Ananda, because Ananda was asking Bhagavan how we should remember you. So the Buddha recommended constructing the stupa. So what is a stupa? How did the Buddha show the stupa? He took his 3 pieces of cloth, he arranged them on a cube in a cubical manner, and on the top of his 3-fold cubes, he put a ball, begging ball, inverted begging ball, and he raised a stick over that. And that was the earlier sort of a representation of the stupa, which Buddha asked Ananda to erect in the honor of the enlightened ones. Very interestingly, the Buddha didn't say that you erect it for me. The Buddha said that you have this monument for all the enlightened people. It included all the people who have understood the supreme law that the Buddha understood. So the stupa to begin with is not something to do with any hero worship. It is the symbol of Nibbana. It is a symbol of enlightenment. And we are going to look at that throughout the history, how that symbol of enlightenment has come into shape. And in Digha Nikaya, the Buddha told Ananda that the stupa has to be erected in the prominent places, on the crossroads. And initially, there was in India the tradition of erecting the monuments over the deads. But the stupa is very different. And we will begin to touch on that. So symbolically, the stupa represents the Buddha, the enlightenment of the Buddha. And we are going to see that there are multiple ways by which we can understand the concept of stupa itself. It is said in the Buddhist tradition that so far as the symbol of stupa remains, the Dhamma will be preserved. It's a very significant statement, that it makes us, understand the great significance of the stupa. And as I said, stupa has many levels of meanings. It has got multiple levels of meanings. Stupa is related to 8 major events of the life of the Buddha. And And we can look at those eight major events. Now, this is very interesting. So if there is a stupa, what do we do about the stupa? So we offer garlands, we offer perfumes. If we could do, we can paint the stupa, we can make salutations, and most important, and become in its presence calm, happy, and satisfied in heart. So the ultimate role of the stupa in the life of an individual is to feel that calmness, that happiness, that satisfaction in the heart about the stupa. And in some of the Buddhist texts, it is said that even if we behold the stupa, or even if we make a stupa out of a sand, that has such a far-reaching benefits that we cannot imagine. So the stupa has got this centrality in terms of the Buddhist practices. So these 8 events that I have referred in the previous slide is about the birth of the Buddha, and there is a special kind of a stupa which is erected in the honor of the birth of the stupa, which is in the shape of a lotus stupa. Then enlightenment and conquering the Mara, there is a special kind of a stupa which represents the enlightenment of the Buddha, the conquering the Mara. And then the third kind of a stupa which is erected on the related to the Buddha's life is the stupa which exemplify the Dhamma Chakra, and it has many doors. The significance of many doors is this, that the Dhamma, to enter into the Dhamma, you got many doors to enter into. Then the fourth kind of the stupa that has been erected in the history of Buddhism, on the site where the Buddha taught Abhidhamma to his mother in Sankisa. Then great miracle at Shravasti, conquest of the Tirthikas. When Buddha was 50 years old, he performed many miracles for many days to convince his opponents that his Dhamma is the truth. And in the honor of that, the stupa was is erected. Then there was a difficulty in the Sangha, and the Buddha did the reconciliation of the Sangha. So in the honor of that reconciliation in Ghosataram, in Vaisali, there is a stupa called the Reconciliation Stupa. And when Buddha was about to enter into Nirvana, the Buddha was asked whether he would be able to stay longer, to commemorate that event. There is a stupa called Stupa of Complete Victory. It is said that if we pay homage to that stupa, it has innumerable health benefits. And then ultimately the Mahaparinirvana stupa. So that's the last, stupa. So there are generally 8 kinds of stupa. And in this picture, you can see those 8 kinds of stupa. And you can also see the stupa prominently here. So you see, these are some of the archaeological representation of how the people worship the stupa. So in the first photograph, you can see that the people are worshipping the stupa, and they are performing some circumambulation around the stupa, and they are doing it in the clockwise direction. And it has got its own significance as to how the people paid respect to the stupa by performing the circumambulation in the clockwise manner, because that's how the sun moves. And it has got a lot of symbolic sort of meaning if we begin to see if we begin to understand every significant act in the Buddhist history as to why it was done, why this stupa was circumambulated in a clockwise manner, because that follows the cycle of the sun. And in the second photograph, you can see that the stupa is being worshipped. And in the third, you can see that a very famous depiction of a stupa where the 4 lions are looking at the stupa. They are as if guarding the law or the enlightenment of the Buddha. It's a very significant sort of a symbol in the Buddhist history. Now, the stupa has got a very special significance in the Ambedkarite movement. So, for example, you see when 14th October, when Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, took refuge in the Buddha Dhamma and the Sangha, in that pandal, there was this stupa of Sarnath. And I found it very significant. Stupa being the symbol of freedom, stupa being the symbol of enlightenment. In the ancient time, the stupa mound was covered with the lamps, oil lamps, and it looked like a heavy mound of lights if you look at it from all over the places. Even that tradition continues today in Sri Lanka, when the stupa is completely illuminated with lamps. So you see, this is very significant here. And you can see Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar with a stupa in the background in the Milian College. So Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar made it a point to have the stupa structures in his buildings. And this photo where, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar is, shown to be speaking, if you notice it, there is a Buddha, and in the background there is a lining of the stupa. And I reckon that this photograph is from 1936, where Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar gave this clarion call of freedom. He said, what way freedom? And we can interpret it as road to freedom. And in that, the speech was given in the background of the Buddha and the stupa. And the central message of that was, be your own light. And the stupa signifies that, arising of the light. So you see, this stupa has been such a central to the Buddhist movement of Babasaheb Ambedkar. Now, I brought this site in order to show you the significance, the great significance of the stupa in the Buddhist history and the Buddhist archaeology. So you see, this pillar over here is taken from a place near Nagpur, very close to the place where I was born, Bandara. This is a pillar which is showing the stupa. And there is a Triratna on the top of it. I'm not able to show you, I'm not able to point it out. But if you look at the pillar, you can see that there is a stupa, there is the Triratna symbol, and there is an umbrella at the top of it. And on the opposite side of it, there is a Naga, and the Buddha Pada, the Pada of the Buddha, the feet of the Buddha are worshipped. And this is very significant because here the inscription was found just a few kilometers away from Nagpur, where it is written that the Naga of the 5 Nikayas helped to erect this pillar. And this was one of the pillars which was associated with the grand stupa in Pauni. So what does it signify? It signifies that the Nagas, who were the masters of the 5 Nikayas, as we know that the Sutra Pitak is about the 5 Nikayas. And the early Buddhism was all about Nikayas, the authenticate texts that are handed over to us from the history. The original text were the Nikayas, 5 Nikayas. And the Nagas of Pauni, the place which is not very far from Nagpur, they were the masters of the 5 Nikayas. And these Nagas helped to build this pillar. They donated this pillar, and it's written there. I'm not inventing anything of my own. And now imagine, after 2,500 years, a monumental event took place in Nagpur. And this stupa that we see in Dikshabhumi, it shows the kind of the continuation of the same kind of a history that we are all so proud of. And it is not some kind of a mythology, or it is not some kind of a story that I'm telling you. There are the archaeological evidences to point out to, what has, taken place. This is the Dikshabhumi. This is the stupa that you see in Pauni. It must be a very grand stupa. We don't have the sculpture of the stupa. Unlike other things like Amravati stupa, we do have the sculpture of the Amravati stupa, but we do not have the sculpture of the Pauni stupa. But because it's one of the very ancient stupas, we can imagine that the stupa must be like what we have today in Nagpur, in Dikshabhumi. So this is some of my adventures of the stupa. This is the stupa from Ellora. This is from Leh Ladakh. This is from South India, Bavikonda, and this is also from the Northeast India. So you see, the stupa is everywhere. You go any direction. You go in the past, you go in the present. You cannot but encounter the stupa. And stupa is such a symbol through which we can unlock a lot of mysteries that we are going to look at in the course of my presentation. So you see, when we talk about the stupa, and when we begin to understand what is the stupa, we can see that this is from Sanchi stupa, and I will get more opportunity to talk about Sanchi stupa in the forthcoming class lectures. But here, significantly, we have to know that there is this Anda hemisphere, then there is this Harmika, which is very significant part of the stupa, and then there is a Chhatra on the top of it. Then there are gates. And all the 4 gates are very important for us to understand, because the eastern gate represents the birth of the Buddha. The southern gate represents the Sambodhi, the enlightenment of the Buddha. The western gate, symbolizes what is called the Dhamma Chakra. and the north gate signifies the Mahaparinirvan of the Buddha, the four events of the life of the Buddha. And the gate signifies in a way that come all from all directions. Because Buddhism is not closed system. It is open to all. And therefore, these four gates signify the importance of letting everybody to join. And you see, there is this Medhi, and then there is this Vedika, this round, the kind of stambhas that you are seeing. They are representing the separation of the mundane world from the so-called, dharmic world. And people can circumambulate. There is a place for circumambulation, pradakshina, where you go clockwise, and the clockwise motion, sometimes it goes up to the top, indicating the way we should progress in our spiritual path. And I will show you how we can do that. So you see, this is, these are some of the elements by which the stupa is made. And you can see from the diagram below the various parts of the stupa. Now, this is the top view of the stupa in Sanchi. So you can see from the top, there is a circle, and you can see the Hermika. You can see various parts of the stupa. Now, if you look at the gates entry to the stupa, we can see that it forms a perfect swastika. Because this is what is being indicated here in terms of the swastika is the from which you can enter into the stupa. So there are four entrances to the stupa. If you map it out, you can find that it meets at the center, and the center in Buddhism is so important. Just to give you an illustration, the circle in Buddhism is very important. Why? Because the circle represents the concentration of all our energies at one point, the center point. And we can equate that with what in the meditation, what we call the samatha, like bringing all our energies together, focusing it on the center. So you go to any stupa, you are definitely going to find the center of the stupa. And then, the hemisphere is there, and on the top of that, there is a conical shape. The cone represents upward movement, isn't it, in terms of the, growing insight into the reality. And ultimately, the sky that is there above the stupa represents the shunyata. I'm going to go to that. But to keep in mind some kind of a symbolism today, it's very important for us to understand why there is a circle, why there is a conical shape in the stupa, because it, in other words, encodes the way we should be practicing the Buddha Dhamma in our day-to-day life. So you see, sometimes we have the swastika in the middle of the, when we look at it from the top, sometimes we have a Dhamma chakra of 8 wheels, 8 spokes, sometimes we have a Dhamma chakra of many spokes, and sometimes we get different structures within the stupa. And I think I will show you, how these different stupas have these different elements inside, and they represent different things. But swastika being a very special symbol, some people say that it represents the 4 noble truths. It represents many things. The 4 number is so significant in Buddhism. So you see, you get an idea as to how when we begin to look at the symbol like stupa, how intrinsically it has got these complicated meanings and complicated understandings. Now, this is the stupa that I was talking about. This is the stupa in Amravati. We didn't find the stupa as it is, but this is the representation of the Amravati stupa. This is the stupa from Pakistan. This is another stupa which has been discovered, and you see this is the stupa very beautifully represented with the inverted lotus, and the inverted lotus has got its own symbolic meaning in Buddhism, and the stairs have got another different meaning in Buddhism. So these are the various forms of the stupa. So you can see that this from Punjab, this 2nd century, then Sanchi stupa, Amravati stupa, Karli stupa. You see this are various Mirpur Khas stupa. Recently the Mirpur Khas stupa was reimagined and reconstructed in Bombay by the archaeologist in the Mumbai Museum. You can read about how beautifully it was reconstructed for today using the computer technology. Then this is in Swat, Sarnath, in Sri Lanka, and this is Borobudur. It's encodes the entire Buddhism in the Borobudur. And we see the Bodhnath stupa, the Choten in Tibet. Then this is from Burma, and this is from Siam. So you see, why I'm showing all these things to you, though there are different forms of the stupa, they in a way represent the same thing. They represent the enlightenment of the Buddha, the illumination of the Buddha, the light of the world. That's a symbol for the Buddha. So there are various meanings and interpretation of stupa. Symbol of Nibbana illumination. There is an architectural one, there is a psychological one, there is a cosmological one, there is scholastic one, there is a ritualistic one, there is an esoteric one, and when it comes to the siddhas, you have a very different encoding of the stupa. But here you can see that these five Jina Buddhas, they are called the five Dhana Buddhas. It's a symbolic form which represents the enlightenment of the Buddha. There are various Buddhas in different colors. In a way, they represent the stupa. And when we look at it from the top, they show the circular dimension, various colors, various elements, various psychological aspects. It's nothing but the stupa itself. If you see the second diagram on the top, it is also the stupa represent in terms of the shape. And in terms of the syllables, there are various syllables attached to various qualities of the Buddha. And, if you see, they form the perfect sort of, a stupa there. And the bottom picture is of Kukai, who use this, the ritual of mandala. Mandala is nothing but the stupa. It's a stupa in the two dimension. And there is an intricate ritual to make the stupa. Make the mandala. It's a practice by which we can step by step practice the Buddha Dhamma. Develop different attitudes, develop different sort of the moods to free our minds. So you see, there are a lot of interpretations of the stupa. There, the architectural, psychological, cosmological, scholastic, ritualistic, esoteric, Sandabhasha. So I'm not going to go into that much because I'm just putting forth before you the depth and the breadth of this stupa symbolism. Now I began with my presentation by talking about the semiotics, and semiotics is very important for us to understand what is it all about. And I thought that I will talk a little bit about the semiotics. So you see, the semiotics is nothing but the doctrine of science. So there are various signs, and there are three elements which are necessary for the semiosis to happen. And of course, there is a sign, there is an object, and there is an interpretant. So what is an interpretant? It is nothing but another representation to which the torch of the truth is handed along, and representation, it has its own interpretants. So meaning of the representation is nothing but a representation. So just keep these concepts in your mind so that they will clarify in the course of the presentation. You see, so we have an object, we have a sign, we have an object and an interpretant, and the process of interpretation goes on and on. So you see, what is a symbol? So symbol is means in English what is something thrown together. Symbol, bringing together. And every object of senses or thought is a symbol in itself. So whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we cognize by our senses is a symbol, and whatever we think is a symbol as well. So symbol is a very broad concept. It's an emerging field of knowledge, semiosis, and a lot of people are now researching into that. I'm not going to touch upon the discipline of semiosis or semiotic. What I'm going to do is use some of the concepts from there to make things clear for us in terms of understanding the Buddhist semiosis. So you see, what is a symbol? Symbol is things thrown together, and there is the objects of the senses and the object of thought, and very importantly, sometimes the symbols are deliberate and calculated. This is very important that the symbols have got such a significance that we have to craft, we have to deliberately create and calculate the symbols. So I will leave you with that concept of symbol. I'm going to go back to that again. Umberto Eco, he talks about unlimited semiosis, where he says, he talks about the infinite series. He says that every sign as a matter of definition is interpretable. And he has written a book called Limits of Interpretation, but that's not our field today. Every sign as a matter of definition is interpretable. The process of interpretation is interminable, which it terms as infinite series. And therefore, the last point is very important. Self-identity of the signified conceals itself unceasingly and is always on the move. So, to give you an example, suppose if you're walking on a street, you pick up a pebble. For a child, it might be a plaything. For for a geologist, it must be, he will be thinking about it, whether it's granite or basalt or what kind of a nature of the pebble, has got. And if that person is an archaeologist, they will try to determine the historical period of that pebble. If you are a physicist, you will look at the pebble in a different way. If you are a quantum physicist, you will look at it in a different way. And if you are a biologist, you're going to look at the pebble in terms of whether you can find some kind of archaic ancient life forms into that. You see, so the meaning changes all the time, as Eco says in this last point. Self-identity of the signified conceal itself unceasingly, as is always on the move. Now, in the diagram that I'm showing you, you see on the top, there is the representation of a stupa in terms of the 5 Buddhas, 5 Dhyani Buddhas: Amitabha, Amok Siddhi, Vairochana, Ratna Sambhava, Akshobhya. And Vairochana is always absent because, symbolically, Vairochana means the great sun. So we compare the Buddha with the sun, but not with the physical sun. So even if that physical sun is not there, the light of the Buddha is always there. It doesn't matter whether it's day or night. So the Buddha is, in that particular aspect of his, light is called Vairochana, the sun, the great sun, Mahavairochana. And, there are symbolically, different Buddhas which are represented. Now, the figure at the bottom is a very beautiful figure. It shows in a way how we progress onto the enlightenment and the freedom. I talked about the road to freedom. And the first layer of it represents, the 4 Satipatthana, and then 4 Iddhibala, and then it goes on all the way up to the Dasabala of the Buddha. So you see, in a symbol like stupa, you see a lot of things are encrypted. A lot of things are there. If we begin to unravel, if we know that secret code, we can understand, what is the stupa? What does the stupa stand for? So you see, the end of semiosis, as C.S. Peirce says, there is a true conclusion of semiosis, and it is reality. So when there is a reality, the process of semiosis is calculated, is done, is concluded. There is an ideal perfection of knowledge. And the last point is very important for us to understand what is the Buddhist semiosis. Semiotic process ends by means of ultimate perfection and complete cessation, Buddhist semiosis. Isn't it? Just by the way of, to make you, get some idea of it, I have put a picture where, 2 people are looking at the Buddha. So there is just the Buddha's foot, visible there, or the rest of the Buddha is gone. And that's all up to us to imagine, the Buddha, the way we like it, the way we have our dispositions. So in Buddhism, the word symbol or sign has a word, and very important word. The word is nimitta. So nimitta in Pali is having multivariable meanings of the sign. Many meanings. And in the Buddhist meditation practices, it's very important word because, you create that mental object within your own experiences and you focus all your energies there. So it's said that after a few days of practice, we should be able to create our own mind-made object, which is called the nimitta. And I don't want to go into technicalities of that, but to tell you that, creating the symbol, deliberate and calculated symbols are very important in the Buddhist meditation system. So just to give you an idea of the Buddhist symbol, or what is the meaning of the Buddhist signs in the Buddhist system of thoughts, it's a deliberately made sign. That's number 1 meaning. The second meaning of it is natural sign or indication. A special type of natural sign, a sign of what is to come, a marker. And there is another word for a marker, linga, a lakshana. They are all beautiful Indian words, Buddhist words, which are there if we want to understand, go into the Buddhist semiotics. And then it's also a word for the sexual organ of both man and women. And it also refers to characteristics, lakshana. So you see, this is, the word sign or symbol in Buddhism has a multiple meaning, as we can see from there. And it has got a connotation with the stupa and enlightenment. So you see, in Buddhism, when we are talking about symbol, myth is also a symbol expressed in a verbal and narrative form. And when we study the Buddhist archaeology, we are going to encounter many of the narrative forms sculpted in the stone, like the Jataka stories, the life of the Buddha, events in the life of the Buddha or Ashok. We are going to witness that. Ritual is also a symbol expressed in gestures and words. As I said to you that, making a mandala or, making a stupa is also a ritual. And, it is the symbol expressed through the gestures and words. And even the doctrine is a symbol expressed conceptually. So you have so many concepts. When you express certain thing with the concept, it's a doctrine. So, this symbol has got, it touches everything in our lives. So what is nirvana? And how does the stupa, represents that? So you see, when someone attains to nirvana or nibbana, it's marked with three characteristics: emptiness, shunyata. Then signlessness, animitta. There are no signs. There is nothing to be attached to. There is no symbol to be attached to. It's like, you are using a raft to carry yourself to the other shore. Once you reach to the other shore, you don't need that raft. You don't need any symbols when you are carried forth. But till you are, that side, we need a lot of this semiosis to do. And then desirelessness. And these three things are connected. Once we experience shunyata, there is no scope for any sign. When there is no scope for any sign, no sign arises, there is no scope for attaching to anything. And these three words are very important. You see, shunyata, animitta, and apranahita. And if you look at the symbolic significance of the stupa, you see that there is a desire realm, kamaloka, then there is a rupa loka, there is a arupa loka, and there is a void. Lokutra chitta, the mind of the Buddha. So you see, in one stupa, in one symbol, you can find so many meanings. Now see, Buddhist semiosis of stupa, self-destructing nature of Buddhist semiotics. You see, when we try to understand the Buddhist symbolism, in a way, we involve ourselves in understanding the Buddhist symbolism, and in the end, no symbol is remained, and that's what the stupa also represents. So what is very important in Buddhism for the semiosis to happen is to have that skeptical state of mind, the mind of the Kalamas, the mind that, Buddha told the Kalamas to practice, to have this mind of examination. So whenever we encounter any Buddhist symbol, or, symbol like in this case, we are looking at the symbol of stupa, we have to have this very skeptical, very open mind to examine it. And now you see in this stupa symbolism, you can see the five elements. Like the square represents the earth element, the round element, a figure represents the water element, the fire element, the air, and the space. And in the second thing, you can see the whole alphabets are given to them. They are the mnemonic devices for us to remember it. And you see the last stupa is very important. It has a shape, but also it has a word in the Siddham language called Vam. Now, I don't want to go into that, but in the Tantric Buddhism, there is a word, Evam, which is considered to be the Advaya or non-duality of the wisdom and compassion. And if you have read a little bit of Buddhism, you will see that every sutta begins with the word Evam. Thus I have heard, Evam, isn't it? So you see here in this just one represents the entire stupa. You see, this is very beautiful. If you begin to look at the semiotic process in Buddhism, we begin to see that how it unfolds the concepts beautifully so that we can practice them. You see, this is what I tried to bring to you in terms of, the horizontal plane, the circle. The circle is supposed to have a center where all the energies are concentrated. So when we begin to practice Buddhism, we try to focus all our energies at one place, and then we ascend that thing, and it's represented in this. And this is how the stupa is traditionally constructed. Also, I'm not going to go into the ritual of construction of the stupa. Very beautiful topic, but because that's beyond the scope of our topic today, I'm going to limit myself. The second symbol that you see is a very famous symbol in Theravada tradition. It represents, in a way, the progression to the freedom and enlightenment. The third is Hum, which in itself represents the stupa as to how we can practice from the basic meditation practice and goes up. And the last is the Inso, the very famous symbol in the Zen tradition. Now, stupa was worshipped, respected from very early on. This slide, this first photograph is from Fanigiri, where you can see that stupa is ascended on a pillar, and people are worshipping stupa. The pillar itself has got a big significance in Buddhism. And I'm not going to go more on that. You see, there are various ways by which the stupa developed from the basic form to very complicated forms in the Chinese, Japanese, and Tibetan tradition. And the bottom figure is about, how the practice takes place in terms of the 4 Satipatthana, then Sammapadhan, then Chattaro Idipatha, then Pancha Idra, the 5 spiritual powers, all the way up to the 7 Bhojangas, then Arya Thangiko Maggo, then the 10 jnanas of the Buddha and 13 Tathagatas power. So in a way, they are 60 in number. And you can see that all this is encoded in the stupa. I'm going to show you a slide which shows that. So you see, this is the complete path to the enlightenment, which is represented in stupa. So you see, these three things are the three steps which we see in the stupa. So the first step is about the Satipatthana. The second is about, the four virya that we have to practice. And the rest, the remaining four are the, the four siddhis or iddhis. And then we can see that there is Saptabodhanga, there is Noble Eightfold Path, and it goes all the way up to the enlightenment itself. And that is all you can see in the if you are trying to look at the stupa from the scholastic point. This is a very famous, in Nepal or in other places, you can see this very beautiful stupa with the eyes. And these are the eyes of the Buddha. They say that, you are actually witnessing the Buddha sitting in meditation, as this sketch shows. So you see, these are the eyes of the Buddha. And you see, these eyes are all over the places, borrowed from different traditions, because the eyes of the Buddha represent something. They represents, right vision. They represents the enlightenment itself, the drishti, the samadhi. And you see, you can see this kind of a stupa all over the places, particularly in Nepal. So what I thought, to just give you an idea is, this is a very beautiful concept. Sometimes they say that you can imagine the stupa to be the inverted begging ball of the monks. And what is a begging ball? No more nor less. It holds what is needed. It summarizes the begging ball of the Buddha itself summarizes the complete Buddhism, isn't it? See how this Buddhist semiotics can help us to understand, very, very many elements. Now, why I chose to do this? Because, this semiotic process is going to help us when we are going forward with the next, sessions, so that we can begin to see what happened to the different symbols. I'm going to touch briefly on that. Beautifully sat stupa on the Mohenjo-daro. Before the Indus Valley civilization was found, they found the stupa of Kanishka. And when John Marshall was conducting the excavation, they found the Mohenjo-daro culture, isn't it? I think it's not an accident that the stupa is found sitting on the very site of Mohenjo-daro. It's not an accident. There is some continuity from the Indus Valley civilization to the rise of Buddhism. Something is amiss in the historical past that we all need to begin to look at today. But you see, this Mohenjo-daro stupa, and the word chaitya is very important. It has to do with chitta. So when we construct the enlightenment within, it is called a chaitya. So chaitya and stupa are the synonyms. Both means bringing together, heaping together. So you see this stupa of this is an artistic representation of a stupa in Mohenjo-daro, isn't it? I'm going to show you some photographs, bringing the significance of it. Now, this is a very famous Mahabalipuram temple in Tamil Nadu. And there is on the top, there is one stupa. And even today, this is supposed to be the Shaivite monument. And any history, any person who is studying Indian history will know that the architectural history of Indian culture begins with the Buddhism itself. So we can see that from where the borrowing has taken place. So the topmost part of it is called, it looks like a stupa. Even it is today called stupi. The South India is dominated by this, what is called the Vimana culture, the Shaivite culture, architectural buildings. This photograph I took from Orissa. And this is showing the homologies of the Buddha, the temple, and the stupa. So this is the Buddhist temple, now completely deserted. Very sad part of it is this, that people go and, relieve themselves around this temple. This is a Buddhist temple in Orissa. Even you can go there and witness today. You see the village boys are playing there. So you see this stupa has undergone transformation, but it always represented the symbol of the enlightenment, the symbol of the Buddha, even the symbol of the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. So this is this photo I picked up 2 days back from the Hazrat Bal, and we know that this is the stupa from Pakistan, Mirpur Khas, and there were stupas. Even today, such kind of stupas are standing in Pakistan, Afghanistan. If we reconstruct them, we can find them. So you see, this stupa has influenced the history of the world. It is not mere a symbol. As I said, that it encodes everything as it were. It includes the art, the science of the ritual of enlightenment. If we begin to study the stupa, in details at length, we ourselves find a lot of help to practice for our own enlightenment. So I'm going to close this slide with something personal. This is the photograph I took like 4 years back, and it has gone viral. Isn't this is my feet, and this is the Buddha. You can see the Buddha. It's lying there. It's lying there to be discovered, and it's in the plain eyesight. Isn't it? The archaeology of the Buddhism is just like this. It's in the plain sight. We can see the Buddha. We can see the contours of the Buddha. We can see that, the Buddha is about to emerge. But we need to make a lot of efforts. It is said that the myth, so-called, it's not a myth, but 84,000 stupas is not a figure that, that cannot, that cannot be unreal. It's a real figure, because the Buddha, the Ashoka has decentralized his power to the people, and they were free to raise the stupas. And the Buddhism was everywhere, because the Buddhism was so intrinsically related with the lives of the people, the traders, that it was a very important place for refuge for the people. And everywhere there were the Buddhist stupas, all the way up to I would say Persia, and we can see today the stupas in China, in Sri Lanka, all over the places. So the significance of that for us today is that there is Buddha everywhere. Buddha doesn't need, as Baba Ambedkar says, passport or visa. He's everywhere. Symbolically, he's everywhere. The second photograph is from a very important pillar of the north pillar of the Sanchi Stupa. And it shows the Buddha. You see this figure, which begins from the bottom with the Buddha Pada, and it extends all the way up to the Triratna, is nothing but the Buddha. It's the Buddha in an iconic form. It's hidden in the plain sight. The Buddha is there. We just have to have that language and the tools to understand the Buddha. So in this talk, what I tried to do is to give you a glimpse of the most prominent symbol. Even to call it a symbol is my tongue is hesitating to call even it a symbol, because the Buddha itself. So whenever we encounter the stupa, when we have the circumambulation around the stupa, we begin to feel that power of the Buddha. And the stupa, why we begin the Buddhist archaeology with the stupa? Because there were stupas all over the places. There were the relic stupas of the Buddha. They were housed in the stupa in a particular way. It was not just the Buddha's body remains. They were considered to be the living Buddha itself. And the living Buddha was all over the places. I have been to Bavikonda, I have been to Battiprolu, I have been to all different places, as many places as possible, all the way from the sites which are gone under the water, hiding in the forest, on the mountains. Everywhere you go, you cannot but discover this symbol of the stupa. And then in the latter period, the stupa was decorated with a lot of symbols, a lot of the Buddha image, but that's the topic for the next talk. So I will stop here, and I will take a pause and welcome any comments or question from any of you.
Thank you, Dahiwale, Mangesh, Dahiwale, sir. I mean, it is very interesting talk, and also the way you have connected the symbols that existed in a reality. I mean, also very historically and archaeologically, and how they are connected to the knowledge actually. I mean, it's very interesting to see that your I will not say the interpretation it is as such, but this is the reality that you are bringing. I think many times people kind of overlook that reality. I mean, I myself like a feeling that like there's this like a stupas I have seen and gone through and tried to understand, but the kind of the eye and lens you have given to understand is very, very vast, and definitely one has to see the reality in the stupas, and also language in that terms. Language is not just words, but also the kind of sites and the symbols that you have shared. So really, thank you for that. I think the two questions, I will just read them, and then we can address them. So there is one question I think there are many questions are coming now. So the first one I'll read it. In ancient time, the stupa was not hollow, or one couldn't enter in it until Diksha Bhumi, Nagpur, Global Pagoda, Mumbai. Was the ancient architecture more developed, or was there some significance of covering the inside of stupa? So this the one question has come from Varcha Jivane. You want to address, or should I read them and then you can?
I can address those questions. You see, this stupa, there was a center. There was this entire architecture, and all the stupas have a space. Like I talked about the Vedikas, so you didn't have to enter into the stupa because the stupa contained the relics of the Buddha. So it was not a functional building. It was a building that represented the Buddha itself. So you don't have to enter into that. And there is a way by which Vedika, and there is Mendi by which you can circumambulate. So you are actually paying respect, honor to the Buddha himself, to the enlightenment itself. So you didn't need to have that kind of entry into the stupas. And modern day stupas like the Golden Pagoda or Diksha Bhumi, they have been made the functional stupas, so that you can enter into them and you can carry on the activities there. So I think that's the difference. In the ancient times, there were no hollow stupas. They were all filled up with some of the stupas were filled up with the bones of the Buddha and had a lot of precious material, lapis lazuli, and gold and diamond and whatnot. So they have discovered such kind of stupas in the northern India, where they found rich sort of the bodhi leaves in the shaped in the form of the people leaf and all, so on and so forth. So that's there, and I think that answers it.
So what I will do, because we have less time, I'll just read few more questions. Please. And then we'll try to search further, because 7 o'clock we have to. So there is another question. What has happened to all these stupas? What are its condition now, and are any any group doing anything to reconstruct these stupas? There is one more question I'll just read. Very insightful presentation, Sadhu. So is there any significance of the symmetry in a Buddhist semiotic, like how it is there in a Greek philosophy and architecture? And what could the meaning and interpretation of the tomb shape of the stupa? I think I'll just these two questions, maybe other question we will try to address later, because this is already, we will see.
Yes, so the stupa is a symmetrical thing. As I told you, if you look at it from the top, you can see the complete symmetry of the stupa. And the center of the stupa is very important, because that's where the Buddha's relics were kept. And it intersects all the points, all the lines intersect there. So in a way, when if we have any study of Buddhist meditation systems, we can see that we have to center all energies at one place, bring it together. And the circle, as it represents that coming of all the energies from the circumference to the center of it. And if we look at the conical shape that ascends into the sky, it represents the kind of the vertical sort of the movement which we all can practice if we are into the Buddhist meditation. So there is, of course, the symmetry. In Buddhism, the symmetry is everywhere. You look at the Ashoka's feelers, the lions, 4 lions of Ashoka. You see, if you go to Ajanta, Ellora, you can see these all symmetrical things. Symmetry is so important in Buddhism, not only symmetry, but there are a lot of asymmetric figure. There are some abstract figure which we are not able to figure out. Like a few years back, I visited Bagh Buddhist caves in Madhya Pradesh, and there were some very abstract figures, very difficult to make sense of them. But, I don't think they are arbitrary. They must be meaning something. Like some of the symbols, we see this on the Buddha's head, this kind of a circular thing which is going up. It shows, it represents some kind of the spiritual development, So symmetry is there all over the places in Buddhism, but at the same time, there are a lot of abstract symbolisms that is there. The 3 Ratna symbol. We only know that there are 3 top, the arrows of it, and there is a shunya there. Now, what does it signify? But we definitely know that it's a symbol for 3 Ratna. And there are a lot of interpretations. As I said, that the interpretation is interminable. Maybe when we are awakened, we are able to see the symbolism as it were, what they mean. So yes, symmetry is there, and asymmetry is there. There are many figures, symbols that we can find in Buddhism. Many, many, many.
So I think, we are very close. Only
okay, there was one question. There was one question that I would like to take. I think Buddhist has asked it.
Yeah,
So let me
maybe
take that
2
question
minutes.
because I think that's very important question. What happened to the stupas? You see, the stupas were standing for a long time. So, for example, the Amravati stupa was standing for a long time, and then there is a history that when one Englishman saw the stupa, it was not intact, but it was substantial. And after 20-30 years, he went back, and all the bricks were carried away to build the other temples and even mosque. Even the mosque in Amravati was built with the help of the Buddhist stupa, and the different elements of the, the remains of the stupa, many elements there, if you can study any stupa, there were the Buddha's figure, various symbols, pillars, ayaka platform, whatnot, and bricks and relics, cascades. I have not shown you the cascade today, but we will look at some of the cascades in the future. And you see all these things were completely disrupted, last 400 years. So is so much vandalism, isn't it? The British did the vandalism, the Brahmins did the vandalism. There was one Jagat Seth in Sarnath who removed all the bricks of the Sarnath site. There was one British gentleman who threw all the what is called the remains of the stupa in when he was building the dam. To give you an example, what happened to the stupa in Nagarjuna Sagar? It's underwater. Devni Muri underwater, isn't it? They tried to reconstruct it outside, but the original stupas are gone. There were many stupas where the Nagarjuna Sagar, is standing today. Many stupas beneath that, isn't it? So what happened to the stupas? Big mystery. But we can still find out. We can still know that there was a stupa. It's a beautiful journey, archaeological journey, to know what kind of a stupa. We are very, I won't say fortunate, but we know that, we can now understand the shapes of the stupa, because, the shape, the famous stupas were also sculpted on different slabs. So for example, Amravati stupa, though it's gone, it was sculpted. So we know how the Amravati stupa look like. So where are they? The stupas are gone. But as I said, that we can recreate them in our minds. We can begin to practice them. We can begin to, in the presence of the stupa, we can begin to feel happy. If we study the semiosis or the Buddhist semiosis, we can reconstruct the stupa in our own minds.
Okay, so it's time now, and thank you, Mangesh, Dahiwale. It was really very interesting. I'm sure that everybody has enjoyed, and it's a new way to understand the reality and see the reality from the stupa and then Buddhist semiotics. So with that note, I would like to thank you on behalf of Navyana Buddhist Charitable Trust and School of Ambedkar Studies and Center. So yeah, and I request everyone to hold their questions. Maybe the next time we can address. So with that note, I will thank you, and I would, I think we'll close here.